Welcome dear students to EPG Pathshala. Today we will discuss on the course of Fields of Practice for the module Sustainable Livelihood Framework. I am Dr. Prince CP, Assistant Professor at School of Social Work, Roshni Nilaya, Mangalore. We need to learn those factors contributing sustainability of livelihood program from this lesson. It also discusses the structure, assets and different contexts, strategies and outcomes of sustainable livelihood program. We do study comparing various agencies that work upon livelihood sustainability both in theory and practice. Now let us get into the topic. What is sustainable livelihood? The very idea of sustainable livelihood was first introduced by Brundtland Commission on Environment and Development as a way of linking socio-economic and ecological considerations in a cohesive policy relevant structure. And there are two types of sustainability. One is environmental, which affects on other livelihood assets, how the different conditions are favorable for a long-standing livelihood. And there is also a social sustainability. It speaks on the stress and shocks. What are the stresses? Stresses are some of the ongoing challenges, maybe a financial difficulty, maybe difficulty to access to the resources. Then there are also the shocks which are sudden, like fire, the flood, all those uncertainties that can block your way. Now we discuss upon the sustainable livelihood framework. Different authors like Ivan Schoons, Ellis speak about the framework of the sustainable livelihood. They start with the basic assets where there is a livelihood platform. You know you need to have some assets in order to start a livelihood. And those assets include human capital, which is the skill, ability of the individual. There is a physical capital, you need infrastructure. If it is for agriculture, there is a land, you need water, you need power. Then there is a natural capital. It includes the soil, the water, the wind, the seasonal facilities. Then there is the financial capital. Both you need to have an investment which is fixed and there is a type of recurring expenditure which you need to meet, and it could be generated either by way of loan or from your own parental property or asset you can make use of it. Then finally there is a social capital. Even if you enter into a livelihood alone, you can't do it alone. You need the help of other individuals, maybe the cooperation from your family members, the people you engage in their work, those people who help you in marketing your products. Suppose it is a service, those people who receive your service, all these are in one way or other are part of your social capital. Thus, human capital, physical capital, natural capital, financial capital and social capital are the assets you use in a livelihood platform. In the framework, they discuss on the access to different resources. When they discuss the access to resources, they speak about some of the social restrictions. You know, gender itself causes a disparity. In our society, which is highly patriarchal, the men have no difficulty to engage in any livelihood. We know Of recent, women who started driving public conveyances, it was a matter of discussion in the society. So even today, the women are not permitted to engage in some of the livelihood. So that there is a gender disparity in entering into a livelihood. And there is a matter of class. So if you have money, you can engage in any work. Suppose you are poor, you are not able to do, you are not supposed to engage in a livelihood. And of course, age is a matter. Although we have child labor, children are not supposed to engage in a work. And in any nation, we find ethnicity is a matter. Suppose you belong to this caste, you are not supposed to do such and such work. So there is a matter of ethnicity, your color, your caste, your class, that prevents you to engage in some of the livelihood activities. Then there is some institutions which again restrict you in access to some of the livelihood measures. They are the rules and customs, the age-old customs and traditions, and some of the land tenures, the land rules which are existing, which prevents you to make use of the land, and some of the market practices where you have no say upon the price of your product. You toil and moil and engage in some activity, you have your product, but you are not allowed to decide what should be the price of your product. That's a situation. So there is a market problem. And there are certain organizations come on the way, either you to help in your livelihood or it may create a challenge. There can be different associations, maybe trade unions, labor unions. There are certain NGOs who are there to help you in your livelihood, who help you in generating finance, who help you to get access to resources. And of course, the government policies and programs are either helping you or preventing you in engaging in a livelihood. The local administration, maybe the panchayat governing body, their policies, you need to get a license from the panchayat. They are the local administration that come on your way. And there are the state agencies, the government rules of making use of the different resources, especially the common property resources, how far you can make use of it, how far you have access to forest resources. All these are decided by the government. Now we come to the context of the livelihood, where there is a changing context. They give two major reasons. One is the trend and another is a shock. In the trend, they say the population, either the ups and downs in the population can influence your livelihood. Then the migration of people, the village people move into the city, and that can affect. So in the village you don't have sufficient hands for your agriculture, or in the village you don't have sufficient opportunity for a livelihood. Then there is a technological change. You cannot use your traditional age-old system as the technology changes. Those who make use of the newer technology get better income, therefore you are forced to change your technology. Then the relative changes in the prices, and also you find the macro policies, not only the national policies, the international policies, with the globalizations, the liberalization, globalization and privatization, the changes that taking place across the globe, the entry of the multinational companies into the nations, into our villages, all those affect. They are some of the new trends. Some of the national economic trends as well as the world economic trends both can influence your livelihood. For that matter, in particular village, once the people came together and they declared that the resources from this particular village, we are the owners, we have the patent. It's not this country or that country who can take patent upon our resources. So they have registered the resources from that village. We need to have such measures in the changing trends. There are also shocks where you are pitching in your idea in a particular context. Those shocks can be like droughts, floods, the pests, diseases, or even civil war as happens in some of the Western Asian countries. All these can affect your livelihood. And of course, next they form a type of livelihood strategies which we will explain further. And we engage in some of the activities which are composed of either a natural resource based activity, the collection, cultivation of different food materials, cultivation of non-food or other commercial crops. Then there are non-natural resource based activities. Either it may be a trade or some services like education or health. It is a manufacture of a particular product. It is of a remittance or other transfers in a financial sector. All these are non-natural resource based activities. Then what is the outcome of this livelihood? Livelihood, there are security outcomes and also environmental sustainability outcome. In livelihood security outcome, you need to find the outcome may be the income level. As it get into a success story, you have a higher level of income. Then there is income sustainability. Within the resources, there are different degrees of risk. Initially, you will have to face those risks, and in the long run, you will be able to meet those challenges. And there is environmental sustainability outcome. Those soil and land quality, it can influence your livelihood. The water availability, the features of the range land, the forest, the biodiversity, how it influences your livelihood. All these are different environmental outcomes. So looking into all these, you need to have a framework in order to make the livelihood a sustainable one. Now we enter into the social structure and livelihood. The social structure has a major say upon your livelihood. The important matter which we need to discuss is the social exclusion. Because social exclusion is a major hazard for the poor people to engage in their livelihood. If we were to explain social exclusion, it is a process in which individual or people are systematically blocked from, or rather denied full access to, various rights, opportunities and resources that are normally available to a number of people. It may be a different group, or which are fundamental to social integration within that particular group. Because you are poor, you are not able to enter into this particular livelihood. Because you belong to this particular caste, you are not allowed to do this particular livelihood. They are the social exclusions. And what is the remedy? Through government policies, you can avoid the social exclusion, like the abolition of untouchability in India, which has helped the low caste people to engage in the livelihood, which otherwise it was prevented. And there are NGOs who engage in promoting the poor people to overcome the barriers of social exclusion. And we know we have major people's movement. Of recent, the Pembile Urimai in Munnar in Kerala, who came together for the hike of their wages. And they had a lot of success stories on their life to have a better livelihood atmosphere. Now we discuss on the assets in livelihood platform. We have the assets which are tangible, like food stores, cash saving, trees, land, livestock, tools and other resources which are more of physical. Whereas there are intangible assets. the claims one can make on food, on work, and the assistance he or she can seek, and the access to those materials, the information available from different quarters, the education of the individual, the health services available for the person, and different employment opportunities. These are the intangible assets. And we need to have both the tangible and intangible assets for a better livelihood formation. And what is the livelihood approach? Poor people require a range of assets to achieve positive livelihood outcome. So we need to analyze the condition of the poverty and how far we can overcome those conditions. And now we discuss upon the different types of assets. There are human capital, which is the skill and abilities of the individual who engage in the livelihood. There is a social capital where the group of people come together and engage in a livelihood. And you have the self-help groups who have formulated different livelihood activities, engaged in food processing, engaged in different service sectors. There are self-help groups who are managing, running the private bus services. There is self-help group in the state of Kerala where they have the operating taxi services, sheet taxi, where the ladies engage in taxi services for the benefit of the women. So this is a social capital. And there is a natural capital. Those who are engaged in agriculture, fishing, business related to livestock, they need to make use of the soil, water and other resources. And you have the physical capital, which is the infrastructures, the buildings, the roads, the machineries which you require for the production of a particular product or to avail a service. And there is the financial capital, which has either an available stocks or a regular inflow of money. You need a fixed asset, fixed capital, and you need money for your recurring expenditure. And now we discuss on the access to the resources. And we know the social relations including gender, class, age and ethnicity has a major influence on the access to resources. And some of the institutions determining the rules, customs, land tenure and market in practice again influence your access to resources. They can either prevent you or they can help you in access to resources. And there are certain organizations such as associations and NGOs who are promoting livelihood. And the local administration and both the state agencies, which I already told you, influence in access to resources through their policies and programs. And you have the structure and process in deciding access to resources such as the state, market and civil society. State by way of its policies, market by way of fixing its prices and varying it, and the civil society through different people movements, they influence the livelihood access. And now we discuss on the context of the livelihood. Livelihoods are formed within the socio-economic and political context. We need the society, we need the money, we need the political programs like the policies of the government to help you out in access to the resources to formulate your livelihood. So that is a particular context wherein we pitch our idea. These contexts change as they create new livelihood obstacles and opportunities. Whenever there are some obstacles, you need to know how to manage those obstacles and challenges. And governance is another context. The form and quality of government systems such as a structure, power, efficiency and effectiveness, the rights and representations, new programs introduced by the government and how they are helping your livelihood, all these matters. And there is also the service delivery, the education, the amount of education. Again, it is a matter of discussion. Of recent, there is an example like one individual in Chikpat in Bangalore. He says he comes from Rajasthan. He is a 10th failed, but he engaged in textile business, and now he is earning, over a period of 10 years, he is earning an income of at an average of 4 lakh per month. And he asks what is the use of higher education. But we cannot deny the higher education where you need the technology and efficiency in engaging some of the livelihood. So both the lack of education, how you can make use of it. If you have education, how you can make use of it. All these matters. And again, your health. You should have proper physical health, psychological health, and also a social health in order to engage in a livelihood. How far you can maintain that health for a longer period of time without much difficulties, that helps you again in engaging in the livelihood. Then there is also the water and sanitation. We know some of the contagious diseases are due to poor sanitation and poor water quality. And the availability of the water and good sanitation facilities help you to design a proper livelihood. Then another major context is the trends. They are the population, migration, the technological changes that take place across the nation, the relative price fluctuations in the market, some of the macro policies of the nations, and both national and international economic changes are the trends that influence the livelihood, whether locally or internationally. And there are also the shocks which are the contexts, the droughts, floods, pests, diseases and civil war. They influence you mostly in pursuing your livelihood. They can be a challenge, and how you are meeting those challenges is a question to be discussed. Now we enter into the strategies of the livelihood. There are 3 major strategies. One is the agricultural intensification and essentification. What is agricultural intensification? In agricultural intensification, you are intensifying the available resources, either through multi-cropping mechanism or using a hybrid variety, so you get a better product. Extensification is you are making use of more land for the same cultivation so that you have more products. So that is one strategy which you can make use of. Now there is livelihood diversification. Suppose you engage in cultivation. When it is off season, you go for some other work. There are people who collect resources and sell it during the off season of agriculture. So that is a livelihood diversification. Then there is a migration. Suppose in your village, you are engaged in agriculture. In all season, you go to the city and engage in some construction related work, engage in some selling of goods. All those are some of the activities related to the migration that you can make use of it, so that you have sufficient income, you have sufficient livelihood measures throughout. These livelihood strategies concerns the individual's available and implemented options for pursuing the livelihood goals. The greater the diversity of livelihood strategy, the higher the household's resilience to the shock trends, and they can meet those challenges, all those difficult situations of the seasonal conditions within the vulnerable context. And now we come to the livelihood outcomes. What are the achievements? As a result of the livelihood, you have a higher income, greater well-being. From your previous situation, you are in a better standard of living. Your self-esteem goes high. your physical security is ensured, and you have a better political empowerment. And it reduces the vulnerability. You have a greater food security. You were starving previously, now you have sufficient food, and you are improving the environmental sustainability. And then there is a balance of livelihood goals which indicate there is a motivation for behavior. Then you have a livelihood priorities, and in turn the types of activities that humanitarian and development agencies should implement throughout. Now we enter into an area where we compare the sustainable livelihood framework of different agencies. One is like the Department of International Development, and there is another agency, the Institution of Development Studies. The leading proponent, Ivan Schoons of the Institution of Development Studies, proposed a modified definition of sustainable livelihood. He says, a livelihood comprises the capabilities, assets, including both material and social resources, and activities required for a means of living. He further gives an explanation of sustainability. A livelihood is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stresses and shocks, maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets, while not undermining the natural resource base. But is it sufficiently covering all the aspects of livelihood? When you compare, you find this new definition does not include the requirement that for livelihood to be considered sustainable, they should also contribute net benefits to other livelihood. It is not sufficient that a livelihood is well running in itself. How far it contributes to other livelihood should be discussed. Then with some minor changes, this also discuss the definition adopted by the Department of International Development. The Institute of Development Studies team also outlined a tentative framework to analyze sustainable rural livelihood. And it has three elements such as livelihood resources, livelihood strategies, and institutional process and organizational structures. There are also a few criticisms, and the Department of International Development framework is one proposed model. There are also other models like CARE, Oxfam, UNDP, and others who use sustainable livelihood models in their programming. Although they are similar in many ways, all models differ slightly in the components of the framework, their emphasis on each part, and the extent to which they implement the framework into their development programs. And now we discuss some of the benefits and criticisms of these agencies upon the sustainable livelihood approach. A sustainable livelihood approach empowers the poor by seeing them not as victims but as decision makers with their own set of priorities. Very often in conferences and discussions, consider the poor as only victims, but they have a decision-making capacity. Muhammad Yunus of the Bangladesh found that capacity, and that's why he could make the Grameen Bank a success. Its transcendence of a sector-by-sector view of development accommodates a variety of economic activities an individual may rely in order to subsist. So even if he is poor, he has a capacity, he has a decision-making capacity, he can make his livelihood a success. To this end, to this purpose, the livelihood approach takes a more holistic view of poverty. You cannot make it a watertight compartment. There should be a holistic view of the poverty, considering multiple resources beyond income level and productivity. And there is a model experimented in Rajasthan where the Jadda model, who says finding the poverty you have a certain resources available in and around which you can make use of it apart from your daily livelihood. That is an added income. Therefore, you cannot measure poverty because you have only this work on these days. There are other sources of income which you can tap very well if you have a will and a means. There are also a few criticisms regarding the views of these agencies, like the lack of guidelines on classifying individuals as the poor. You are branding them, you are labeling them as poor. Then that's not enough. There is no enough emphasis given to the informal structures and processes that affect access within the community, as I said, the Jeddah model. And there are the local organizations, they may not have the capacity to carry out the type of analytical research integral to the sustainable livelihood approach to development. Then how you can make use of the locally available resources and study them in depth and get into a new model. So all these you need to discuss when you study the sustainable livelihood. Now we come to the conclusion of this topic. We started with the definitions of sustainable livelihood and mentioned two types of sustainability, such as the environment and social. We discussed the framework in detail, the assets, the context, the strategies, the different activities, and also the outcome of livelihood. And finally, we discussed the similarities and difference between different frameworks of major governments and NGOs, like the International Development Department as well as the Institute of Development Studies, who gives new versions. And also we found the criticisms of their views and how we need to give a new definition for the poor so that we value them and engage them in different livelihood activities to make it more accessible by making use of the government help, the NGO help, as well as the people movement. For your better reading, I would suggest the International Development Department's work on sustainable livelihood guidance sheet, and there is Krantz and Lay's work published in 2001, The Sustainable Livelihood Approach to Poverty Reduction, an introduction, Swedish International Development Corporation Agency. There is also the work of Shambhu Prasad and V. Joseph Sadish on livelihood education in India, published from Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, and also Surabhi Rajagopal's work published in 2013. And you have certain exercises where you try to find out different sustainable livelihood program in your neighborhood and examine the factors that contribute to its sustainability. And for your field visit, you may visit an agency that works upon livelihood promotion for the past 10 years minimum and discuss with them how they made it more sustainable. Hope you enjoyed the section. Thank you.